What's up, my Makokos, Raid Pros, and Bonk Bros? Defender here, and welcome back to another video. Hope you're all having a wonderful day wherever you are. Today we're going to be talking about the controversial topic of gatekeeping and elitism, because it's kind of the #1 problem in endgame right now, I'd say. The difficulty of the content isn't necessarily a problem because of power creeping, and the eye levels and the materials that we're getting are more than enough to cover the content. But I feel like the gatekeeping is getting worse and worse, and people on their alts, new players, kind of returning players, just can't get into raids because of the high level of expected gearing or progress for you to get into a group. And so today I'm going to cover 10 of the top tips I've come across and kind of experienced as I've been playing to avoid gatekeeping or get over that gatekeeping barrier to get you into the top tiering of raiding. So with that being said, let's get straight into today's video. So these are by no means in any particular order. They're just kind of the top 10 that I've kind of come across and kind of jotted down as I've been playing, because I've been denied from plenty of groups myself on my alts as I've been playing, and it's kind of made sense from reading kind of topics on the forums and Reddit, and people when I'm in the groups, they talk about what they want and why, and it makes sense for a lot of the cases, but there's definitely ways to get around it. So let's start with #1 then, and that is SIDEREALS, okay? Learn SIDEREALS. Everyone should know how to use the SIDEREALS, all of them, in each of the raids that you're doing. A lot of the time, when you're in a group that's divided into 2 parties, someone in each party needs to know how to use the SIDEREALS, and most of the time, especially in a party finder or a pug group, people don't, and no one speaks up, and it just requires the person that made the raid to use the SIDEREALS, and then just pass the lead to someone in the other group and pray they know what they're doing. Oftentimes it's the support player. But SIDEREALS play a incremental part of each raid. Sometimes they're required to even surpass certain mechanics, or you need to learn the way to do the mechanics in an alternative fashion to even avoid using the SIDEREALS, right? So Vicus, frogs and way, for example, versus time stopping and staggering, or you might use Balthor to avoid the mechanics in Vault and Gate 2. There's lots of different examples, or Shandy in Belshazzar Gate 6 with the black holes. There's lots of different examples, and you need to know how to use SIDEREALS, and it's difficult if you don't, because you need to be in a raid to actually learn them in the first place. But obviously you can go to YouTube and find examples of how to use them, or you can go onto lots of different websites that give you kind of lost arc tips, and they'll tell you how to line them, or when to use them, or health bars that are important, or which ones not to use and which ones you should use. There's lots of different scenarios, and obviously just going out and doing some research is the best way to do it, and then going into a raid and trying it out. Maybe do it with some friends, or maybe when you're in a group that you're on farm content with. But that is my #1 tip so far, and that is the SIDEREALS. #2 on my list is learn PROKEL. So PROKEL is, if you're not in Belshazzar right now, then you can skip this, because this one applies specifically to the Belshazzar raid, but is the most important desired thing right now in Belshazzar is someone who can do PROKEL. I'll put some footage up on screen of doing that. PROKEL is the true boss of Gate 2 in Belshazzar right now, and most groups are farming Gates 1 and 2 on their alts, and so they're looking for PROKEL fighters, if you will, and these are people that go in and they'll 1v1 the main boss, if you will, in Gate 2, and he has lots of different mechanics. He has some ones that will kill you if you don't know them. He has an armor or a damage buff that kind of ticks up on you over time, and he does more damage to you, and you need to know how to juggle that and how to either leave and come back, or just to kill him quick enough to get through the encounter. There are mechanics you need to dodge or time stop. You need to know when you can CC him. There's lots of different variables, and depending on your class, then you need to kind of know how to approach it, and whether or not you can maintain staying in there, or leaving and swapping with someone, or going back in. There's variables to it, but it's very, very important that you know how to do this on your class, because it will get you into Belshazzar raids. It is one of the most desired things. If you can just apply to a raid, they let you in and you say, I can do PROKEL, that's fine, you're in, you will not get replaced, and it is one of the most desired things right now. So make sure that you go and practice that in Trixion if you haven't already, or when you go in, you say, I can do X amount on PROKEL, I need to back out, and then someone can swap in as a substitute. You can take shifts in the fight, but if you can do it, then kudos to you. That will give you massive brownie points when you're getting into a group. And whilst we're on that topic, #3 on my tips is doing Mario 3 in Circus, the Legion raids. So there are 4 portals in Gate 3 of the KWTD raid, and each one of them is called Mario 1, 2, 3, and 4, respectively. And Mario 3 is deemed as the hardest content in that raid, and if you know how to do it, it is very desired by people in the party finder. Often when you apply for a group, you'll often see it say, G1 to 3 looking for Mario 3, or looking for Mario 3, 4, because 4 often is another one that's desired, but 3 is always needed. And if you can do 3, you will pretty much be able to get into any group that's looking for people, because that would be one that people don't want to do, or they would prefer someone else to do every single time, because not only is it the hardest, but it's also kind of later on in the fight where mistakes mean more. If you make a mistake in the start of that, you can just quickly restart. 60 seconds is nothing, but to invest kind of 10 minutes into a fight and then have to restart hurts a lot more. Mario 4 can be skipped if you do enough damage, but Mario 3, you really, really need to know, and it is, in my opinion, it's very predictable. You can learn everything, but the timer can be quite close for people that take their time. They're quite cautious with it, take their time with it, very kind of safe in terms of doing the mechanics. So making sure you know how to do Mario 3 is absolutely incremental and will get you into a lot of groups for that content as well. And also it's just a good sign of being able to do some of the harder mechanics and practice as well, which is another point. You can go into Trixion and practice this at your leisure whenever you want for any of the Marios. So I'd highly recommend practicing Mario 3. Okay. And number 4 on the list is no party synergy. So what I mean by party synergy is what your class and other classes bring to your raid. More specifically, your party, if you will, because your party is the team that's affected by your synergy and their synergy affecting you. A paladin in another group won't affect you, and you vice versa, you won't affect them. So the 3 people that you're in a party with, how does that synergy apply to that group? For example, if I'm a berserker and I'm in a group, I don't want another berserker in my group because our synergies, we don't really match that well. Obviously, it is okay to have multiple of the same synergy on top of each other, but there is diminishing returns. For example, if you're using crit and you keep adding more crit people into the group, you're probably going to be over on crit, and it's not that desirable compared to having kind of 1 defense down, 1 crit, and then maybe something in the middle like pure damage from a Sork or a Berserker, those kind of things. So understanding each class and what their synergy brings to the table is a big factor in avoiding gatekeeping. If, for example, if I'm on my Berserker and I'm looking through groups to apply to, and I see that both groups already have a Berserker in, I'm not even going to apply, because odds are, first of all, I'm not even going to get it accepted, and second of all, it doesn't really suit the party synergy anyway. So unless it's really on farm content, it's not worth my time, because I'll be performing probably subpar than a better synergy would, and I'm probably just going to get rejected because they've already got several berserkers in there, and it's just kind of an understood system to kind of have a varied list of classes. So there are many documents you can look at for party synergies. Just understanding yours is a great first step, but also understanding which ones match yours and trying to avoid applying to ones that already have that covered, because a lot of the time you will get denied. Okay, so that's another reason you might get denied and might not understand why you've been denied, because people don't tell you, right? When you get denied, you don't know why necessarily. Which I'll get into later on. But just, knowing all the different synergies from all different party members, and you can kind of mix and match and understand what the best ones might be. And so you know when to apply for a group because your synergy matches. And I'll put that in the link below, and I'll put it up on screen now as well so you can see. But definitely learn synergies for the more popular classes and the ones that you're applying to. Okay, and let's talk about number 5 now. And this is probably the biggest topic, I would say, in terms of gatekeeping, and that is supports. Okay, so first of all, number 5 is player support. If you don't want to be gatekept for any content, play a support. Supports have no issue getting into any content, and the best example I can give you is we recently were looking for a replacement on Belshazzar Gate 6. I think one of them couldn't make it that day, or accepted a support that applied just because he was 1520, which is the exact eye level required, right? We're all way over. 1520, 3x3 engravings, I didn't care, just having the support in the group is all that matters. It doesn't have to be 5x3. He doesn't have to have level 7, 8, 9, 10 gems. He just needs to have, first of all, the right combat stats, the main important engravings, which are the first 3, your class 1, Awakening Expert, those kind of things. And then just having some gems for cooldown on his abilities and knowing how to play is the biggest thing. So I have a friend right now who's just started a support, and he gets into any group without any issues on eye level. anytime. You know, he won't ever get rejected if it says plus support. So that is obviously the biggest thing you can do in not getting gatekept at all, is playing support, because we have a huge support drought. Supports are always needed, and you should have a support alt as well, because it's just always good to have one to be able to get into content as well. And whilst we're on to supports, let's talk about number 6, which is befriender support. Now, this kind of sounds a bit gimmicky, but it's always good to know someone who plays a support, whether or not it's a friend's alt or it's someone else's main that you've befriended. Supports have access, like I said, to getting into content without being gatekept, and it's very, very, very common practice now when you're looking for a group that you see there's multiple gaps in a group. It's because they're waiting for a support, and supports often bring a friend. And that's because people tend to swap playing maybe their support alt with a friend's main, and then they take turns and they swap again, so that their friend's playing on the support and they're playing on their main, and they can both get into 2 lots of raids together. And it's quite common. And when, for example, our groups, we're doing content and we have gaps to fill, we often won't fill all the DPS and wait for one support. We'll leave a couple of gaps, so that the supports often bring a friend. And that, generally speaking, means more supports apply. Whereas if there's just one gap for a support and they have friends, they're not even going to apply, because they know they can't get in and get their friends in as well. So having someone as a friend, or that you play with, or that you know that has a support that you can take turns with, and you can kind of piggyback off each other getting into raids, is another one to avoid gatekeeping. And I've used this myself several times, and I've also used it for a friend of mine that's a newer player, to get him into raids like Vicus on eye level, just by going on my support and getting him tagged in as well. I think there's power in playing a support at the moment. Use that to your advantage, obviously without it being kind of toxic and elitist. Get less gatekeeping, essentially. Okay, so we're on to number 7 now. And number 7, I would say, is pre-equipping titles or gear or aesthetics or whatever it might be for that content to show you've already beaten it. On an alt, for example, you're probably not using titles that you've got on your main. But a lot of the time when you apply for groups, you're going to see it says, G1 to 3, re-clear alts, and then it'll have like title. And title just means that you have the achievement that's given you the title for beating that content. And equipping it on your alt means that when someone looks at you applying in the group, they can see already you've got that title, so you know how to beat that content, or beat that specific part of the content, whether it's like the Incubus titles or the G1-2 titles in Brashaza. Having these titles means that you know how to beat that content, you've been in that content before. Whereas if you have no title, like I often do myself, it doesn't prove anything. You know, you could be over eye level and never beaten that content. You know, I've had plenty of runs in Clown where people are like, 30, 40, 50 eye level over, but they don't have the title. And it's very clear they've never beaten the content, because, they fail to the swords in G3, or they get knocked off a lot in G2, or they run out of time in the maze in G2. There's lots of examples. But the title proves that you've beaten that content, and having it equipped before you apply just gives you that extra level on top of other people applying, so that when they inspect you, the first page they see that title, and they instantly know this person has beaten that content, and then they can go through the other checks of, do they want you in the group for other reasons. Number 8 then we're on to, and that is join learning and prog groups. Okay, even if you know the content, if you can't get into groups, you should be looking at, kind of as a last-ditch effort, looking at kind of the learning or the prog groups, because oftentimes most of the people in there know what they're doing, or they've read the guides, so they already have an idea of how to cover everything, and they're very, very patient. They're also a lot friendlier. They're not expecting a lot from other people. And they're also kind of not going to leave after 1 or 2 wipes, which some people do in their very kind of top tier elitist kind of gatekeeping. You see people that do 1 or 2 wipes and they say, I'm out, or 1 more and I'm out, and they're gone and you have to reform, and it's a waste of your time. The learning and the prog groups often are very inviting of accepting people on eye level, or slightly under geared on their engravings, or maybe they don't have the title, or maybe you haven't actually done the content yourself, so you don't know all of the mechanics. They're very patient. Sometimes they'll explain stuff to you. Sometimes they'll get Discord groups together. There's more opportunity for people to kind of, it's a safer environment, if you will, to learn the content, to beat the content in a slower pace, and to not feel kind of threatened by that kind of elitist mentality when you join a raid. Even if you know the content, maybe you're not comfortable with all the mechanics. So there's more aspects of flexibility in joining a learning or a prog group. So bear that in mind, okay? Okay, number 9, we're getting to the end of this now. Number 9, I would say, is research your encounters. Okay, this doesn't apply to first clears. Okay, so if you're playing for the first time, I would say don't worry about researching stuff, just go in and enjoy the content. Don't apply for stuff that's farm, obviously, if you don't know the content, because you're wasting your own and everyone else's time. But if you're looking to do it for the first time, don't go ahead and research. You'll enjoy it more without knowing. But if you're comfortable with doing the content, make sure you research it, you understand the mechanics fully, you're capable of understanding when things happen at certain health bars on the boss or at certain times in the fights. You know which battle items to use, you know kind of the roles that you perform in the group, you know your position for certain mechanics, like 3x plus 1, or whites and greens and reds and blues, those kind of things. There's lots of different mechanics, and oftentimes you're paired with other people in those mechanics, or you're part of a group doing a mechanic. So making sure you understand that when you're on the right side of a map, when you need to stand in a certain area, those kind of things are very important. And it shows if you don't know that in a raid, because it will often affect other people or cause wipes. And so knowing all this content just proves even one step further to not being gatekept. There's nothing worse than going into a group and maybe the first two pulls, the same person fails certain mechanics over and over, and that group then will just back out and replace that person. And that's not nice for the person, because maybe they're not familiar with the mechanic fully, or they haven't done that mechanic role in the raid before. They're a different group, they do a different role, or they just made simple mistakes. But either way, the other people there, especially if they're very elitist, they're not going to wait. They're not going to give that person much time or flexibility with that mechanic, and then it's just another form of gatekeeping, right? So make sure that you do learn encounters, you do learn the mechs. You're not just relying on other people's responsibilities. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with all the different mechanics without spoiling the content for yourself. And then the absolute final point, number 10. And this, in my opinion, is probably the most important. I mean, I haven't been doing them in any particular order, but this is probably my most important tip to new players, returning players, or people that get gatekept, is make your own group. Make your own group is probably my top tip, because first of all, making your own group is something that 9 out of 10 people just do not do. People are lazy, they're worried, they're scared, they're impatient. There's lots of factors, and they just don't do it. They'd rather just find a group and keep applying for an hour or half an hour than making their own group and waiting in the lobby to fill it. It's a big thing, right? I have friends that don't even make their own groups because they're not comfortable with lead, the responsibility of leading the group, or the SIDEREALS, like I mentioned before in one of my other tips. They don't want the responsibility of being in charge of the group. They don't want the responsibility of having to find people, and it just doesn't happen. But in my experience, I've had a lot of success with just making groups. People will apply to those low numbered groups out of 8, for example, or 4, and then you have more control over that gatekeeping, which I would further then add to not gatekeep, within reason. If people aren't geared, then obviously don't take them. But, it allows you to stop the elitism and the gatekeeping by in turn accepting people similar to you. And then you can all together progress through that content, beat that content, farm that content, maybe make some new friends, make new support friends, and vice versa, like my previous point. But making a group is the absolute best tip. You will fill it in no time, honestly, with no problem. You might just have a support issue, but that is just the issue with everyone at the moment in the kind of the population balance in the game. There's nothing you can do about that per se, except for making a support, or knowing a friend with a support, or meeting someone with a support. There's not much you can do in that aspect of things. But that is my absolute top tip, is to make a group, learn how to make groups, be comfortable with taking leadership of it, looking through people, accepting people. Then you learn the synergies as well, like I talked about before. It has a trickle-down effect for the rest of the points I've mentioned. So make sure that you start being comfortable with making groups, even if you're making a group with other people, and then filling the gaps as well. That's a good place to start. So yeah, those are all of my top 10 points. Hopefully I've covered everything that you guys would expect to hear about. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any other different points that you would like to cover in terms of gatekeeping and elitism, because I'm sure there are a huge list of varying reasons that people gatekeep and are elitist. I'm very, very confident that most people in this game gatekeep for engravings, okay? So you want to avoid that topic of engravings, because obviously to gear out your character and have engravings and combat stats and cards and stuff. So I don't want to cover that topic because that is a known topic that you guys are obviously working on. We're talking about the extra factors that you can do to help yourself along the way. So I hope you guys have great success with this and you get into some more raids and content and have a great time, maybe make some new friends, learn to be more confident in the raids, take on a bit more responsibility, and yeah, just have more fun in progressing. Please let me know down below if there's any other things that you think I should have added in here, because I'm always keen to learn more about the reasons people do these things, and maybe we can add some more in the comments down below, and I'll pin the top ones. So thank you very much for all of your support recently, guys. We are almost at 2,000 subscribers. I appreciate each and every one of you stopping in to watch the videos. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those things that YouTube wants me to do in my videos. I really appreciate that. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.